I went into premature labor because of my sister, because she pushed me and I fell. She didn't apologize and I almost lost my baby. It all started when she wanted to take my car and I was against it. Because of this situation, I don't have a sister anymore. It all started on a morning like any other. I was 8 months pregnant, waddling around the house and trying to prepare for the baby's arrival. My to-do list felt endless, and every little task left me out of breath. That's when my sister called. She was frantic, saying she absolutely needed my car. Her kids had some after-school club, and apparently, this was a life-or-death situation. I told her I couldn't let her borrow it. I had my own plans. There was a prenatal appointment later that day, and honestly, I wasn't in the mood to deal with her drama. But my sister didn't take no for an answer. An hour later there she was, standing on my doorstep with her kids, demanding the keys. She didn't ask, she demanded. Her reasoning? You're just going to sit at home all day anyway. That comment alone made my blood boil, but I tried to stay calm. I told her again that I needed the car for my doctor's appointment, and that it wasn't up for discussion. But my sister wasn't having it. She crossed her arms, stared me down, and started raising her voice. She made me feel like I was being unreasonable, like her kids' club was somehow more important than my pregnancy. I could already feel the stress building in my chest, but before I could even take a breath, the situation escalated. Her voice grew louder as she started pacing on my porch. She wasn't just annoyed, she was furious, like she had the right to my car just because she asked. I tried to explain again, but every word I said seemed to pour fuel on her fire. You're always so selfish, she yelled. I'm doing this for my kids, and you can't even help out your own family? What kind of person are you? At that point I'd had enough. I told her that I wasn't giving her the car and she needed to leave. But instead of walking away, she barged into the house, her kids trailing behind her, and started looking around for the keys. My heart was pounding. I told her to stop, but she ignored me, pulling open drawers and rummaging through my things like she owned the place. I could feel myself shaking, not just from anger but from the stress of the situation. The baby had been moving a lot that morning, and now I could feel sharp twinges in my belly. I told her she needed to leave, that I couldn't deal with this. But instead of backing off, she turned to me, got right in my face, and yelled, "If you won't help me, then what good are you?" She pushed past me, trying to head toward the kitchen, and that's when it happened. As she pushed past me, my balance gave out. I stumbled backward, feeling a sharp pain shoot up my side, and before I knew it, I was on the floor. My belly felt tight, and the twinges from earlier had turned into something more serious. I tried to get up, but the pain was unbearable. My sister froze for a moment, realizing what had happened. Instead of apologizing or helping me, she started yelling again. "You're so dramatic! Get up already! It's not like you're in labor!" I couldn't believe it. My mind was racing. Was I in labor? Was something wrong with the baby? The stress and fear overwhelmed me, and tears started rolling down my face. But she just kept ranting about how I was ruining her day. Her kids stood by the door, wide-eyed and silent, clearly uncomfortable with the whole scene. Meanwhile, I was struggling to breathe through the pain. I told her to call an ambulance, but she just scoffed, saying I was overreacting. That was when my neighbor, who must have heard the shouting, came rushing in. She saw me on the floor, pale and clutching my stomach, and immediately called 911. My sister just stood there, muttering about how everyone was against her. Got it. Let's start fresh and keep it one part at a time. The paramedics arrived quickly, but every second felt like an hour. I was lying on the floor, clutching my stomach, and my sister was still standing there, looking annoyed as if I had ruined her day. My neighbor was the one answering the paramedics' questions since I could barely speak through the pain. When they asked what had happened, my sister jumped in and said, "She slipped, it's no big deal." I couldn't believe her. Slipped? I wanted to yell the truth, but I was too focused on the baby. I couldn't feel any movement, and that thought terrified me more than anything. The paramedics carefully lifted me onto a stretcher and wheeled me out. As I passed my sister, she muttered something under her breath about me. Overreacting. My neighbor gave her a glare that could kill. On the way to the hospital, the paramedics tried to reassure me, but I could see the concern in their faces. I kept asking, "Is the baby okay?" But all they could say was, "We'll know more when we get there." The ambulance pulled up to the hospital, and everything became a blur. Nurses and doctors swarmed around me, asking rapid-fire questions while wheeling me into an exam room. I could barely process what was happening. The pain was still sharp, but the worst part was the silence in my belly. I still couldn't feel the baby move. One nurse hooked me up to monitors, while another pressed an ultrasound wand against my stomach. I held my breath, waiting for any sign that my baby was okay. Finally, after what felt like hours, the room filled with the faint sound of a heartbeat. I broke into tears. The relief was overwhelming, but the doctor's expression told me we weren't out of the woods yet. "You're at risk of preterm labor," he said calmly but firmly. "We'll need to keep you here for observation." My mind raced. This wasn't supposed to happen. I had weeks left before my due date. The thought of the baby coming too soon terrified me. But there wasn't time to dwell. The nurses were already moving me to another room, starting IVs, and monitoring my contractions. While I was being stabilized, my phone buzzed on the tray next to me. It was my parents. They had heard from my sister, and instead of asking if I was okay, they wanted to know why I had upset her so much. "She told us you made a big scene," my mom said when I picked up. "You need to be the bigger person and call her to smooth things over." I was speechless. Here I was, lying in a hospital bed, trying to keep my baby safe, and they wanted me to apologize? The anger bubbled up inside me, but I was too exhausted to argue. Instead, I hung up and turned off my phone. The next few days in the hospital were a blur of beeping machines, doctors coming in and out, and constant worry. The nurses were kind, and I was thankful for their care, but the isolation was crushing. Every moment, I was waiting to hear bad news or feel something go wrong. My sister? She was nowhere to be found. Not a single call or visit. It didn't surprise me, but it still hurt. My parents, on the other hand, wouldn't stop pestering me. They kept calling and leaving voicemails, asking why I wasn't reaching out to make peace with my sister. "She's family," one of my mom's messages said. "You can't hold grudges like this." Each message made my blood boil more. I couldn't believe they were siding with her after what she had done. Not once did they ask about me or the baby. It was always about her. On the fourth day, my doctor came in with an update. The baby was stable, but they wanted to keep me for longer to make sure there were no complications. As hard as it was to hear, I was grateful for their caution. My baby's safety was all that mattered. That night, my parents showed up unannounced. They didn't come to check on me, they came to push their agenda. "You need to call your sister," my mom said as soon as she walked in. "She's upset, and this isn't healthy for anyone." I stared at her in disbelief. "Do you even realize why I'm here?" I said, barely able to contain my anger. She pushed me. I could have lost my baby. Instead of acknowledging what I said, my mom waved her hand dismissively. "She didn't mean it. You know how she gets." That was it. I told them to leave. I didn't shout or argue. I just pointed to the door. When they hesitated, I pressed the call button for the nurse. "You can come back when you care about me and this baby," I said. After I told my parents to leave, the room fell silent. I stared at the ceiling, trying to process everything. The people who were supposed to support me, the ones who should have cared the most, had just walked out, choosing my sister's feelings over my safety. For the first time in a long while, I felt completely alone. No family checking in, no messages of concern. Just the steady beeping of monitors and the occasional kind smile from a nurse. It was painfully clear who truly cared about me and who didn't. Days turned into a week. The doctors kept me and the baby under close observation, and while the contractions slowed down, they warned me to take things easy. I wasn't ready to go home yet, but at least the baby seemed to be stable for now. At the end of the second week, everything changed. Late one night, I woke up to sharp pains that felt different from the ones before. The nurses rushed in, and before I knew it, the delivery team was prepping me for an emergency C-section. I was terrified, but I didn't have time to panic. Within hours, my baby was born, a tiny, fragile boy who came into the world fighting. They whisked him off to the NICU before I could even hold him, but just knowing he was alive gave me a glimmer of hope. Recovery was slow, and every day felt like a battle. I wasn't allowed to leave my bed, and every minute that passed without holding my baby felt like an eternity. But the nurses kept me updated, and knowing he was in good hands kept me going. The NICU felt like another world, quiet except for the steady hum of machines and the occasional cries of tiny fighters like my son. Every nurse and doctor became a part of my routine, their faces a mix of reassurance and urgency. But that day, something changed. It started when a new doctor entered my son's room. She introduced herself as Dr. Alvarez, a specialist called in to oversee the most fragile cases. She was calm, confident, and had a way of explaining things that made me feel like we had a real shot. "We're seeing progress," she said with a small smile. "Your son is responding better than expected. He's a fighter, just like his mom." Her words gave me a flicker of hope I hadn't felt in weeks. But just as she walked out, a nurse rushed in with a worried expression. "There's a visitor downstairs for you," she said hesitantly. For a second I froze. Visitor? My mind immediately raced to my parents, or worse, my sister. I reluctantly left the NICU and made my way to the waiting area, my stomach tightening with every step. But when I turned the corner, it wasn't who I expected. "Hey, love!" There he was, my husband. His uniform was wrinkled, his eyes tired, but he was here. After all the months apart, the weight of everything came crashing down, and I burst into tears. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, pulling me into a hug, careful of my still healing body. "I came as soon as I could," he said, his voice cracking. "I'm sorry I wasn't here sooner." For the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't completely alone. My husband's presence brought a calmness I hadn't experienced since this nightmare began. But of course, peace doesn't last long when my family is involved. The next day, just as my husband and I were about to head to the NICU to see our son, the nurse at the front desk stopped me. "Your parents are here," she said cautiously. I froze. My stomach churned with a mix of frustration and exhaustion. I didn't have the energy for their guilt trips, not now. But before I could process what to do, they were already walking toward me, expressions caught somewhere between guilt and defiance. My mom spoke first, her voice laced with the same tired plea I'd heard too many times. "We've been worried about you. You need to let this go and talk to your sister. She's upset too, and it's not healthy to hold on to this anger." I could feel my blood boiling. "Upset? She's upset? I'm the one in the hospital because of her." My dad tried to step in, his tone softer but just as infuriating. "Families fight. You need to forgive her. She's your sister, and she made a mistake." Before I could respond, my husband stepped forward. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it I rarely heard. "Let me get this straight. You're here, not to ask how she's doing, not to see your grandson, but to tell her to forgive the person who put her in this hospital." My parents looked taken aback. My mom stammered, "We just want everyone to move past this." "Move past this," he repeated, his voice rising. "She nearly lost the baby, and you're worried about her sister's feelings?" When they didn't respond, he pointed to the door. "If you can't support her right now, you need to leave. And don't come back until you figure out what actually matters." They looked at me one last time, as if expecting me to stop him, but I didn't. I just watched as they turned and walked away. A few days after my parents left, I was finally starting to feel a little lighter. My husband was by my side, my son was growing stronger, and the nurses and doctors had become a comforting constant. For the first time in weeks, there was a sense that things might actually get better. But, as always, my sister had a way of ruining everything. It was late in the afternoon when I saw her. I had just returned from the NICU, ready to rest for a bit, when I heard a familiar voice echoing down the hospital corridor. My heart sank. There she was, standing by the nurse's station, casually chatting with one of the staff like nothing had happened. She was holding a coffee cup in one hand and her phone in the other, scrolling as if she were here for a social visit. I couldn't believe it. After everything she had done, putting me in the hospital, not visiting once, ignoring my calls, she had the audacity to show up now? When she noticed me, she smiled, as if we were on good terms. "Hey, I thought I'd stop by and see how you're doing," she said, her tone dripping with insincerity. I stared at her, dumbfounded. "You thought you'd stop by?" I repeated, my voice shaking with anger. She shrugged. "Well, Mom and Dad said you were being dramatic again, but I figured I'd come check on you anyway." That was it. I didn't care who was around, I let her have it. My sister huffed, clearly offended, but instead of leaving quietly, she made one last attempt to shift the blame. "You're blowing this way out of proportion," she snapped. "I came here to check on you, and this is the thanks I get?" I stared at her, completely stunned. My husband, on the other hand, wasn't about to let her spin the narrative. "You came here for yourself," he said sharply. "Not for her, not for the baby. And honestly, you've done enough damage. Just leave." For a moment, I thought she might actually listen, but then she dropped a bombshell. "Fine, but don't expect me to help when you need it. And don't be surprised if Mom and Dad side with me after I tell them how you treated me today." She said it with so much arrogance, as if she still thought she was in the right. That was it for me. I walked up to her, my hands shaking, and pointed to the door. "Get out. You're not welcome here anymore," I said, my voice firm even though I felt like I might collapse. She rolled her eyes, grabbed her coffee, and strutted out like she'd won some kind of argument. But as the door closed behind her, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. I turned to my husband, who wrapped his arms around me. "She won't bother you again," he said softly. "I hope not," I replied, though deep down, I wasn't sure. 6 months have passed since the chaos with my sister, and I can finally say life feels normal, peaceful, even. My husband and I are stronger than ever, and our little boy is thriving. The days in the NICU feel like a distant memory now. Our son is no longer the fragile baby in the incubator. He's a healthy, happy little boy, full of life and curiosity. Every morning, I wake up to his cheerful giggles and the sound of him trying to babble his first words. He's started trying to walk, too. His tiny legs wobble as he grips the edge of the couch, his face lighting up with determination and excitement. Every time he takes a few steps before plopping down, he looks at us with a big toothless grin, as if to say, "Did you see that?" Watching him grow and explore the world has brought so much joy to our lives. It's a reminder of how far we've come. My sister hasn't tried to contact me since that day at the hospital, and honestly, I don't miss her. My parents occasionally bring her up when they call, but I keep the conversations short. I've learned to prioritize my own peace and my family's happiness over toxic relationships. For the first time in what feels like forever, I'm not carrying the weight of other people's selfishness. I have my husband, who stood by me through the worst, and my son, who fills every corner of my life with light. As I watch my little boy take another wobbly step, I smile, knowing that we're finally in a place where we can just be happy.